We're going to have a quick conversation with a blue economy entrepreneur who's located in St. Lucia. Today, we'll be speaking to Johanan, who's the founder of August Organics, which is operating at the cross-section of agribusiness and the blue economy. I am Wayne Elliott, the coordinator for innovation and productivity at the Compete Caribbean. Welcome, Johanan.
Thank you, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice seeing you again. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Johanan. Let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where was your entrepreneurial spirit born, and how was it fostered? Who fostered it, and how did our August Organics come to be?
The first part of your question, I would say it's definitely the household. I was born into an environment with parents who challenged me very early, especially my mom and my dad as well. So I would say that where I grew up was a big driver there. I also just had a natural inclination towards entrepreneurship from a very young age. I'll never forget my mom got me this book. She was a principal of a high school. She came home with a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And for some strange reason, I was about 9, thereabout. I picked that book up and I became fascinated with the concepts of assets and liabilities and all of that. And so, from a very young age, I started to think very differently about wealth creation, but also what job and career would I have to get into to be able to provide for my family and to have a legacy and leave an impact. I was thinking about it from a very just young age, and growing up in that household with my parents who were both teachers was very instrumental in that. In terms of how August Organics came to be, I always start off that story by saying God. That's the that's the answer to that. Sincerely, I think that that was divine inspiration, I'd say. Reason being, how I stumbled onto the problem, how the journey has unfolded thus far. I honestly believe that everybody has a purpose on this earth, and I think solving this issue at scale was my calling, and that's kind of how I stumbled onto that. I could always get into that deeper, but that's how I'd give the overview. We saw an issue with the sargassum seaweed. I went to the Ministry of Agriculture at the time and just asked, what can we do with all of this abundant seaweed? And the response then is much like the response now. We'll come into that, where there was a lot of myopia, where it's like, okay, it's that chorus that people sing, right? We're small island developing states with open economies prone to exogenous shocks. Everybody says it. Every prime minister, every government official, that's their chorus, right? And when I heard that, I saw the impact that it was having on fishermen. I saw the impact it was having on the community, and I wasn't satisfied with that response. And I believed that with the support of my family as well, but I also believe that we could have done something to create an industry from this. And I'll share a little bit more about how far we've come in doing that.
Thank you, Johanan. I mean, all over the Caribbean, we're hearing August Organics. It's ringing all over. Particularly in the development space, everybody's interested in learning and hearing about the work that you're doing. So can you share it with us? What is August Organics all about? What are you doing now? How did you make it happen? How are you making it happen? And what are you going to be doing in your future? What's your vision like?
It's a great question. So what we actually do, Algas created a circular economy. We created 2 things. The first one is a model, which is a circular economy model, which transforms sargassum from trash to a raw material. And so we have developed a system of collection, processing, and export of sargassum, right? So we collect it, we process it into biofertilizer using a patented process. And that product of that process is called the Algas Total Plant Tonic. It is a liquid seaweed-based biofertilizer. And what that product does is 3 things. One, it improves the nutrient uptake of crops by up to 20%. So a farmer could lower their fertilizer cost by up to 20%, which is huge. The second thing the product does is it allows farmers to increase their crop yield. So when you use synthetic fertilizers, their NP and K, apart from their harmful impacts on the environment, the plant does whatever they want. The plants metabolize the nutrients however they choose to. So the plant may allocate more of it to vegetative growth. meaning it just gets big and tall. You don't sell the plant unless it's lettuce, right? If you set growing tomatoes or flowering fruit, you sell fruit. And so our products actually help that plant to focus more on producing more flowers and fruit, which means a bigger harvest, a bigger yield, and that means more money in the farmer's pocket. So we're saving farmers money by reducing fertilizer costs and increasing their yield using this product. And the third thing the product does is actually help farms deal with abiotic stress. So with climate change, you have hotter days, you have cooler nights. All of these things impact crop yield, where flowers drop off, fruit doesn't get formed. And again, that impacts the farmer's bottom line. So we are helping plants also through this product be more resilient to abiotic stress, increase yields, and reduce fertilizer costs. So all in all, we're making farming more profitable and more climate resilient. We have processed over 1 million pounds. It's about 2 million pounds of sargassum to date. We export to 6 countries. We're just getting into North America. I don't want to speak on that one too much, but it's huge. And I think that we're really on the cusp of, I think, creating the industry that I saw back in 2014 when we started. So, yeah.
Good. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing, John. For, whenever you spotlight success stories, it always seems like it's very well packaged. You almost have a highway laid out and all the pit stops along the way. Like, how was it for you in your journey? Like, tell us about the hard parts. Tell us about the sleepless nights, the challenges. Where were those hurdles for you?
I think they were plentiful. As you go throughout the company life cycle, you have varying challenges, right? So starting from the very beginning, I was teaching, and I started Gas Organics on the side, not as a side hustle. I always saw it as something that was going to be big, but I just didn't have the time and resources or capital to start it as a full-time entrepreneur. So I was teaching and trying to get this company off the ground for the first 2 years. That was a challenge, just balancing everything out. And inherently in the early stages, the first challenge that you have to deal with is confidence. One of the biggest ingredients for success outside of faith in God and not just having faith is absolute confidence. I have spent a lot of time in first world countries, and I've seen that the first world manufacturers are not more brilliant or more talented than us in the Caribbean. It's just that they have more confidence. And so anyway, so confidence was a big hurdle initially. I didn't have a PhD in biochemistry. And so sort of the Caribbean skepticism was like, who's this guy who claims he came up with something? And that was a big hurdle up front. Even if I was seeing success with the product, there was always this kind of thought in the back of my mind, are we doing the right thing? But over time, when you have 100, 200, 1,000, you're seeing the same result over and over again in terms of success on different farms. That kind of builds up your confidence. So I think confidence was a big thing. Capital was a second major hurdle in the early stages. My parents retired just at around the time we were trying to scale up. And they were our first investors, right? So that was a huge, huge thing. But prior to them, capital was an issue. I always say that in the Caribbean is not startup friendly, and governments tend not to be very startup friendly, especially if you're a person of color. If you're not and you're a foreigner and you come in, maybe you might get stuff, but no, it doesn't happen that way. We need to face these facts, right? So, so the capital was a major issue. But what that made us do is actually focus on being more efficient in our use of capital and figuring out how to turn $1 into 5 and 10 and 20, because you just didn't have that pool of capital coming in. But so I would say capital, I'd say confidence. There was this one time that we were waiting on some sales and I almost got evicted. Right. So I'm being very transparent when I say that entrepreneurship is not ever a straight road. I would encourage all blue economy or just entrepreneurs in general to look at the startup life cycle. There's something called the the valley of death. We're just coming out on the other side of that, but that's the graveyard of startups. And I think the biggest challenge for me has been sort of navigating that valley. And just to unpack that briefly, and I guess we could jump to other questions. The way that valley works is you have a product that works. So there's not a technology risk anymore. It's demonstrated its ability to consistently work. So there's not a technology risk. Your risk in the valley of death is product market fit. So you've created something of value. Can you deliver it to a group of people who care about it enough to pay for it before you run out of money? And thank God we're on the other side of that, but that is the scary, and everybody has to go through it. So that has been, I think, that has been the biggest hurdle, I would say, for us, but we've gotten over that, thank God, right?
So, I mean, we often hear about access to capital, but I mean, in your experience, how important was it for you to have access to really strong networks and the know-how? How important was that?
Right. I think in the Caribbean, and that's why I really respect IDB. I respect Compete Caribbean. There are a lot of organizations that sadly I don't respect because they're all about talking and not actually assisting entrepreneurs, right? Access to capital, if you go back to as the first report probably ever written on entrepreneurship or the private sector in the Caribbean in the 1970s would have told you that access to capital is an issue. But I don't think we have any more access to capital now than we did then. So nobody's really serious about that except Compete Caribbean, IDB, UNDP to a large extent. Those are the organizations that helped me out early on. So when I first had the idea, and I'll talk about the importance of access to capital in terms of how we even got to where we're at, there's no way I could do this on my own. Doesn't matter how brilliant the idea was or is, there's no way you could do it on your own. So I had an idea and no capital. I was working and saving money and investing it. Instead of going out to parties and all of these nice things, I would invest every cent I had in the early days. And then I realized that you could only do so much of it. There comes a point where you need outside capital. And I didn't come from a rich family, obviously, so we had to be strategic. And so I approached Mr. Giles Romulus at the the UNDP office in St. Lucia. And he took a gamble on us. He said, you know what, this idea sounds good. We had to partner with an NGO. We got a grant of 50,000 US. And that's how we built out our first small, boutique factory and started real production, right? That grant got us up to a point where we could generate enough capital to get sales. We started exporting from that. And then, of course, after that, we got IDB on board with us. Now, we're dealing with some huge fight. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but we'll come to that. Maybe you'll hear about it sooner rather than later. But, so I say that to say, if you take UNDP out of the equation in the initial instance, and then you take IDB out of the equation later on, then you just have a great idea that died. And it doesn't matter how committed I was or whatever it is, if you don't have the access to capital, then nothing is going to grow. And I've said it time and time again, I think that a lot of the capital that's going to governments that are going to other avenues need to be directed to startups, not small businesses. We need to make a clear distinction between what a startup and a small business is. And that's the problem. The Caribbean supports or tries to support or thinks they understand small businesses. What the Caribbean needs if it wants to develop is to understand what a startup is and what kind of support that actually needs, because it's non-existent.
Oh, thank you. And Joanne, you mentioned something that I think is very important, and I would ask you to go a little bit further and unpack it. Oftentimes you identify as a startup, and there's some unique challenges that you would have faced as a startup in the Caribbean region. So share a little bit about that experience with us and unpack it a little bit. Where are we? Am I a startup? Am I a small business? Should I be a small business? Should I continue to try to be a startup? How do I differentiate?
Right, that's a great question. I think, first of all, the concept of small business needs to go away from Caribbean mentality, right? A startup, I like the word startup. Startups by the North American definition, you have a solution to an unproven problem. A small business is like a pizza shop, a mom and pop shop, a gas station. You sell gas, there's a proven demand for gas. It's a small business, right? You sell pizza, there's a proven demand for pizza, it's a small business. If you're creating a pizza vending machine that you can order pizza through an app by pulling up along the sidewalk, that's a startup because you're not sure there's actually demand for that, right? We're a scale up. I think we've gone past this startup stage. I think we're a scale up. And just to differentiate a startup, the differentiator between a startup and a small business for me is innovation, right? It's doing something in an innovative way that has an unproven market that has huge potential, right? I would say that, in the Caribbean, it's not startup friendly at all. I don't have to talk about that. If you read up all of the reports, we know this, right? The ease of doing business in the region is terrible. And you have, at the institutional level, unprecedented, it's not unprecedented, it's a continuous myopia that makes things 100 times harder than it should be. And that's why you don't see a lot of success coming out of the Caribbean. Most companies that do well start in the Caribbean and then have to relocate because it's just not friendly, right? I'll give you an example. We are in the sargassum processing business. We're going to be processing almost 3,000 metric tons a month. But that is 3,000 metric, that is 36,000 tons per year. That is a few million pounds. But then there's a project that the UN, there's a regional project now with the, right now to take sargassum and throw it away. Where's the, so, right? So rather than building an industry, then it's I don't have to give many examples. Myopia, small thinking, and continuing to operate in silos is the downfall of I think the region, and it's not startup friendly. If you make it to a point where you can survive outside of there, then focus. I would tell all entrepreneurs to look outside of your home island or home country, because one, it's too small, and two, the support systems may not be there outside of agencies like Compete Caribbean, IDB, UNDP. I think these are some of the agencies that have been very helpful from my experience, but all the others have, IECA has been really helpful to us, but a lot of the other agencies that just talk, you go to an accelerator, you do something, and you have no more access to capital than you did before. So it's a lot of big waste of time, I'd say.
Thank you. Well, what was the turning point for you? When did you know that you knew? Like when did it click for you?
That happened very recently, and that might sound weird, but we got a lot of accolades, but the accolades meant nothing to me because I wasn't doing it for recognition. So we got on the Forbes list and all of that, and that was great, but that didn't move me. I think when I knew was very recently. We were solving big problems for very small farms. So the average farm size in the Caribbean is a quarter acre, 0.25 acres. In North America, in Europe, the average farm size is about 400 acres. And the same work you have to do to convince a guy or a lady or a person on 0.25 acres to use your product is the same amount of work you have to do to convince somebody in 400, 1,000, 2,000 acres to use your product. And for me, I was very confident in solving big problems for small farmers. I think what really said to me, yes, is when you introduce your product on the world stage, mega farms, and you see that same level of performance where it performs at that level that exceeds expectations. That was when I was like, yes, all right, we're not confined to small farms. We can boost food security in the Caribbean, yes. But globally, if you put this product among the big boys, we can stand and hold our own. So that was when I was, I really felt, I think we have something that can scale to really the next level.
Oh, thank you, and congratulations. So let's shift a little bit. You've created a product. You're doing very interesting things, and there's almost like an Achilles heel for many product innovations in the Caribbean, which I refer to as, and everyone knows as IP, right? Intellectual property. Tell
Mhm.
us about your IP development, your registration journey. At which point did you decide you needed to get this done? What was it a process like? There are many people who would love to, but they're so afraid that it's a process that will never end. It's super
Right.
expensive. You don't have the support. Tell us about your journey there.
Wow. I think we go back to the first point of confidence. So, in experimentation and trying to formulate the product, because of course I had to formulate the product, had to be tested by ISO 9000 labs, internationally certified labs, then field tested. So it wasn't just like I made a product and started selling it, right? You have to get country registrations. It's a bunch of stuff. And so I had already made the product. It got tested by Cariri, by CARFA, which Cariri is the Caribbean Industrial Research Institute, CARFA, which is the Caribbean Public Health Agency labs in the US, all over the place. And even after, I could see, yeah, this product works for sure. When it came time to patent, I think I lacked the confidence upfront. I delayed it a lot, and thank God I got to a point where I just decided, okay, let me do that. But I didn't think because I didn't have a PhD or a bachelor's or a master's in biochemistry, I honestly felt maybe this wasn't innovative enough to actually be awarded a patent. And boy, was I wrong. We got the patent issued. We got a patent, a PCT. So we got the patent issued in 152, we got protection in 152 countries, and then we filed in North America, Europe, and Canada. So we're well covered globally with that patent through WIPO. So the first thing was confidence, right? It was really about believing that even if you're from a small island developing state, take that mentality out. You're a creator and you can create things anywhere in the world. And it stood up to international rigor and we got the patents, right? So confidence was the first thing. The second thing in terms of that, my home country, we had to file through lawyers we had to do it outside of the Caribbean because again, the Caribbean is not serious about, and I can't go into too much detail on that, maybe separately, but we had to get that patent outside of my home country because the Caribbean isn't, in my view, and I like it to go down as my personal opinion, not as a fact, but from my experience, which has been fairly extensive, the Caribbean doesn't really care about intellectual property. And why would I say that? Your actions, when it pertains to a subject, dictate or are a clear indicator of how seriously it ranks among your priorities. And I am aware that there's been legislation to be passed in the individual state level for IP that's never been passed in a lot of member countries in CARICOM. So is CARICOM's or the OEC serious about IP? By their act, they may say so, but by their actions, no. It doesn't seem that way to me. That's my opinion. So we had to go outside of the Caribbean to get that done. Thank God I had the confidence to do it. It is expensive, and again, if it costs money, and thank God we had the grant funding to support that. Right, the IDB funds helped. We knew the funds were coming, and so we were able to leverage some funds that we had to pay for it, and then we knew, okay, that was going to be reimbursed, thank God. But again, without that intervention, how would we have ever been able to afford that? There should be grants, if we're serious about IP, to support innovation, because that's what's going to drive development in the region. But again, the region's not serious about development. We like extractive industry, not we. The leaders of various of the countries enjoy extractive industries, and they're not interested in really building anything that's going to be a homegrown driver of change, from what I've seen. Right? Maybe you've seen something different, right? So it's confidence, capital through grants. That was a big help. And going out, don't depend on your country. I went to we tried to file a patent in St. Lucia and they told me to do the poor man's copyright. You know what that is, right? You write your invention down, right? They
Yes,
tell you
yes.
put it in an envelope, right? Stamp the date, and then it gets you. That holds no water. If somebody decides they want to knock your stuff off in the Caribbean setting, at least, or they want to do it international, that might give you protection in your home jurisdiction. But if you're exporting it to the US or somewhere else, you have no protection. Right? So that's what we've seen, to be very transparent.
In that process, what's the one piece of advice you wish you had earlier?
Uh, you know, I feel like that process played out exactly how it was supposed to, right? So it flowed the way it was supposed to. I would say the piece of advice I'd like to give that I wish somebody told me would be confident. Please document properly, and do not share this with anyone except your lawyers, because I had situations where you know people would try to come in. I'll say this, and it stay away from knowledge sharing. A lot of agencies and people talk about knowledge sharing. That's your intellectual property. When I knowledge share with you, you can take that and leverage it and make billions of dollars, and nothing happens. So be careful with knowledge. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Be careful with knowledge sharing, because you took time to develop that knowledge. That knowledge has value. I think that's what I'll say to that.
Okay, no problem. And I assume that's outside of having your patent held and approved, correct?
Absolutely. I think that once you could prove that your technology works, there's no need to get into the nitty-gritties of it with anyone unless you're licensing it, right? You can't go to a Coca-Cola executive and say to them, man, I was wondering how you make Coke. You can't do that. They're not going to have it. And Coke isn't even patented. It's a trade secret, but they protect it, viciously. And that's what I think that we should all do with our IP.
Very similar to the 11 herbs and spices.
Exactly, right? Do a trade secret, just keep it. That is gold. And I think we've missed, I think the Caribbean has missed every industrial revolution there has been, but I think the one that's happening now is absolutely IP driven. Sanctions have been filed against certain emerging powers because of IP. It's big. It's huge, and we need to see the importance of it.
I'm going to ask you my final question, and then I'll allow you to provide any final thoughts that you have. So here's my final question. We take a look at you, and we see there's some youth there, right? Tell me about operating in these spaces with the big guys. You've recently done some stuff in the north. How does it feel? Is it what's it like being the baby of the group, really?
It's an amazing feeling. I think that it brings you bring a different perspective to the industry. When you're working, I think innovation doesn't reside just with young people. I think everybody can be innovative, but I also think that by being the baby of the group, you are less stuck in your ways and you're just coming in. So you are able to see the gaps that exist in the market and to be more nimble and flexible and more willing to try and experiment and innovate in a way that the bigger guys and the bigger boys don't care to, because they have something that's working already. And I think that's a real superpower, because the market in small markets, not so much, but if you're in a huge market and there are a few big players who are content, there's a lot of scraps falling out, and eventually you could get the whole meal rather than just the scraps, right? So I think that it's been good. If you take yourself seriously and you know what you're about, nobody really cares about your age, right? From my experience, right? They may have their opinions, but as long as you can substantiate what you say, and you are somebody who is grounded in ethics, you're an ethical person, you're a no-nonsense person, you stand on your word, you're a man, a woman, a person of your word, and you perform, you have your reputation set for you.
Hey, Jonathan, I think that's an excellent point to wrap up on. And I want to thank you very much for sharing your afternoon with us. I know you had a very busy day on the farm and getting things going. So we really appreciate the time that you shared with us. I'm sure the room appreciates the conversation that we just had and that they were able to witness. And how do we reach you? How do we reach you? How do we get more on August Organics? How do we follow your journey?
Absolutely. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at Algas Organics, or you could check out our website. If you're in North America, you can order the product online. It'll get delivered to your door in like 2 days. If you are not in North America and you are in Trinidad, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenada, Belize, you could probably get it at your nearest agro shop because it's island-wide and countrywide in those places. You could also check out our website. It's www.algasorganics.com. And Massey in most countries, yeah, St. Lucia and a few other countries would have it as well.
Thank you, John, and have a good day.
You too, man. Thank you.